This episode of the TRM podcast is brought to you by TRM, trusted IT solutions for today's business challenges.
Hello, everybody. My name is Norman Carr. I'm from TRM Technologies. I'm the president and CEO, and I'm pleased today to have our practice lead for everything Geospatial, Todd Lewis. And Todd, if you'd be so kind, I've got a few questions I'd like to ask you, and perhaps you can give us some insight into where you see things are going, and what trends you're recognizing, and what value you think we could add to some of our clients in terms of from an IT perspective and helping them improve their business, enhance their business, and so forth. What problems are you seeing from the private and public sector that are keeping you busy today?
One of the biggest issues we're seeing, there's a couple, but it's really around access to data, and specifically the data people need to make their decisions. With COVID going on and whatnot, there isn't time in a lot of cases to retool the business applications and whatnot that you have. And both private and public sector, people are being asked to do different things in different ways, new processes, new approaches with the systems they have. So a lot of what we're being asked to do is how do we get this data out of these systems that we have and provide them in a useful way back to clients? So provide them in a useful way back to clients, and so that people can make decisions quickly, and often it's getting it into an application that is maybe the main application that a particular user is using, so they don't have to switch across 3, 4, 5 different applications to do whatever they're doing for their business.
Can you provide some insight into areas that you're working with in terms of ERP or asset management or CRMs?
Let me start from the CRM side. We're seeing a fairly big move to major CRM platforms for larger organizations, so Salesforce or Dynamics, cloud-based platforms, basically to keep people working, whether they're working from home or in the office. And the CRM is basically the gateway, if you will, for a client's access into an organization, or a customer access or a citizen's access into an organization. So it's often where a request or query for information or notification of something first lands. Once it's in the CRM, it often needs to go to some other system in an organization. You mentioned asset management or ERP. In work that we're doing in municipal government, a lot of information moves to the asset or work management system. So this is the public works department that's going out, sending the guys out to fill potholes, cut the tree that fell on your hydro line, whatever the case may be. So often those requests end up in there. And when that work is being done, a lot of information is being logged. So a lot of that information now is moved mobile, where workers in the field have access to mobile devices. They're entering information in, and the materials that are consumed, labor hours consumed, any of the specialized equipment that's accessed or used, all of that needs to be accounted for and pulled into the financial management system. So essentially so that you can reconcile what the costs of any of those operations are for the organization. So what you see there basically is data moving through these various systems, being repurposed into the context for that group of users for that system. They're taking that data, they're adding to it, they're adding other information that system is managing, and then that data again is being pulled out and repurposed into another system. So for larger organizations, public or private, this is really what we see is each application that the data moves into, there's some value add, there's some manipulation, and it'll be extracted and moved into another system to perform those functions again on the data. So really, I guess what we're seeing is data moving system to system and flowing across the organization. And back to your previous question, really, that's the problem that we also see is how do you facilitate the movement of that data through the organization?
Nowadays, you're not seeing organizations take on large, complex projects of this nature. I'm seeing, and I'd like you to talk about, if possible, sort of the no-code approach to building some of these solutions and delivering some of these solutions.
Okay. So what we're seeing in the enterprise space is kind of two trends at the same time. A movement towards platforms. So I'd mentioned Salesforce. There's other platforms. So there's the platforms based on Oracle technology, Microsoft technology, SAP. Any of these sort of large companies have a platform approach to the market. At the same time, there's highly niche products that are coming in to solve very specific use cases, right? So it might be, how do I track the vacation time for my employees? And though there's a whole plethora of systems that are just focused on sort of your vacation or time tracking specifically, and they do exceptionally well at managing that. They have great user interfaces and all of this. So you have this kind of crazy montage of these enterprise platforms with these small, highly focused systems interspersed across the whole organization. And in the traditional context, we would have one of these big applications and we would just constantly layer additional application code on top of that to add these additional capabilities as we go. What we're doing now, instead of adding that code in, is we're purchasing these customized apps. And the issue now becomes, how do you integrate those apps into sort of your larger platforms, or moving the data in and out across your larger platforms. So no code approach is a very efficient way of doing that. Most of these applications have application programming interfaces, or ways to access the information and push and pull it in and out of those applications. So if you can connect these environments together with a known interface, have some workflow and rules capability that can be built in, the no-code integrations allow you really to almost take a business process map and some data mappings in a visualization environment and put those together in a very logical way that's very visual, rapidly test and make sure all of that's working, and quickly deploy that into production. So that's really what we mean by a no-code approach. And this is coming up largely because of that both move to major platforms and fragmentation of highly specialized sort of organizational functionality.
Todd, over the last year or so, are there any clever solutions that you'd want to make clients aware of?
Yeah, I mean, there's some funny ones that we've done that you kind of wouldn't think of it even being like a data problem or something that we can optimize or organize. So I'll give an example. For City of Hamilton last year, they had a project where they went out with mobile mapping technology that captured all of the parking restriction signs in the city. So and basically mapped those to the block level. So they had a person that walked from, a sign that said you can't park between, say, 3 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. because of rush hour. They would walk where that restriction was. So they'd have essentially a geographic line that marks that restriction. What they wanted to do with all of that data is turn that into actual regulations. So bylaws that say, here are the parking restrictions, and the signage reflects those bylaws. So we're going from geographic data collected out in the field to legal text that says something like the parking restriction, 3:30 to 5:30 p.m. Starts 200 meters north of Chadwick Street and continues to 300 meters east on Main, as an example. So that was kind of a crazy way of taking some geographic data and almost reverse engineering it into legal text.
Interesting. Maybe I'll change gears a little bit here. Can we talk a little bit about the race to the cloud? There are some milestones in the history of cloud computing, including the launch of Salesforce in 1999. Amazon Web Services 2002, LinkedIn 2003, Facebook, etc. What does it mean today, 2020, 2021, right around the corner? What's going on in the cloud?
Yeah, so what we're seeing, especially since COVID, Scott Galloway out of University of Chicago talks about decades in weeks, right? So this idea through COVID that we're seeing what is taking decades to happening in weeks. So we see the conversion to e-commerce as an example. That was a steadily progressing trend that from April to the end of May jumped more than it has in the last 2 decades, right? Just due to COVID and people needing to get access to goods. We're seeing the same thing in public and private organizations, the sudden switch to cloud first, or I'd almost say cloud only approach, right? So we used to see in procurements or people going out for bid, yeah, talk to us about your cloud offering and your on-premise offering, and we'll make the decision. Well, if you don't have a cloud offering or it's not as full-featured or functional as your on-premise offering, that might actually disqualify you from even being in the running. Right, so it's a huge switch just in the last few months due specifically to COVID and this whole change with remote work, change in behaviors around shopping and consumption of products and services and where they're consumed. So that's really a big change in the race, we'll call the race to the cloud. With a lot of the work that we've been doing as an example in government, they weren't really tooled for remote work. Suddenly everybody had to stay home. They didn't have enough VPN licenses to cover staff to even work from home to access their network. They're being asked by their councils or their director generals or deputy ministers or whoever's kind of in charge to, well, how do we provide services, especially services in government that generate revenue or provide payment distribution to the population? How do we move those as quickly as we can to the cloud so that they're accessible and we can continue to manage them and continue to operate? Government in particular was not ready for this.
I want to frame this appropriately, but we're seeing today a move from old platforms to newer platforms. And the newer platforms, while they're efficient and cost effective and so forth, are not addressing everything that the old platform might have addressed. And I think in some cases, clients are moving on and then realizing as they get into it that, oh, we forgot this, or we didn't, we need to add that and so forth. What's the number one sort of challenge or problem you're seeing come out of sort of the rapid movement to new tools and so forth?
One of the things that we see really is trying to replicate old process with new tech, right? So when you're rolling out new tech, often they're seeing feature functionality that's super useful. Maybe there's some AI or some automation that's simplifying the workflows that happen in that application. But it's still being plugged into a process that has existed for 10, 20, 30 years. And that process can't handle really that new way of doing things. I mentioned earlier about a lot of these platform solutions with some small, quick solutions that are doing exactly that, filling in the gaps. And the issue there becomes, how do you deal with the challenge of integration? Do you work with one of these platform apps and its ecosystem of partner applications? Or do you bring in sort of the best in class to handle those areas where there are gaps, regardless of whether it's in that ecosystem or not? Either way, the issue comes down to, how do you move the information around to where it's needed? And what do you do about the process that people are using and are struggling to let go of, especially if there's manual approvals and escalations and things like that, that often require a physical signature is a big one. How do you incorporate those into some of the new technologies and techniques?
Access to data is no longer a challenge with the tools that are available today. There are many exciting new applications leveraging geospatial data, beacons, and other emerging technologies. Anything that you've seen of late that you're excited about, something you can share?
I'm not sure if I would agree with the statement that access to data is no longer a challenge. It's almost the opposite. There's too much data, and it's more of a challenge to filter and figure out what needs to be consumed to make particular decisions. The amount of data coming through various sensor platforms, whether it's satellite imagery, sort of your smart city style applications where you've got connected sensors and devices that are streaming data in, all of this information is providing basically a massive stream of new data. Each stream typically has a technology that's sitting on top of it that's aggregating that and is providing some decision-making capability. But the interesting thing really is when you start to combine all these streams of data, overlay it, add in some machine learning or AI capabilities, and really start to discover new patterns that you weren't previously able to see. That's what's really interesting. And there's a lot of work that's being done on the cloud services side, sort of the hardware side of things, very differently. So we have Amazon and others, for example, where you're able to deploy aspects of the Amazon cloud directly into a sensor, so that it can work independently of the internet. When it is connected, it can provide data directly into your internet applications. Some of the other things that I think are really interesting, you mentioned beacons. We do a lot of work with beacons with our people flow application, tracking the movement of people and things in indoor spaces. One of the things that has been holding beacon technology back, in particular around using it for asset management, inventory management, or understanding the movement of people, is really the fact that each of those beacons has to be tied to a battery. And that's starting to change. So we've got a couple of companies now that are exploring energy harvesting, which is a technique of pulling microwave radiation out of the air from all of our Wi-Fi devices, cellular phones, 5G, harnessing that power to be able to broadcast something. Maybe it's a temperature readings, or maybe it's people's presence or movements or other things like that. So basically being able to take that technology, divorce it from the battery, and have it be essentially at a similar cost as what we see for RFID. So that's really exciting. I think in the next couple of years, as that capability matures, we're going to start to see all sorts of new applications that really deal with where are things in the world right now, and if they move, what kind of insights can we get from when they move, where they are, when they're moving from one place to another. So I think that's really exciting for us. It's something that we're really focusing on, those data streams, the use of various beacon technologies.
Thanks for your time. Look, what we're trying to do here is obviously make our customers aware that there's an ability within our organization to help them develop new solutions, leverage existing platforms, existing tools, and so forth, and hopefully engage Todd and his team of resources to help build that next great solution or resolve that problem that they're challenged with. So thank you for your time this afternoon, and thanks for those who have taken the time to listen to this message.
Thanks for the opportunity, Ron.
Great. Thanks, Todd. Appreciate it.
Yeah.